The late afternoon sun spilled across the quiet stretch of County Road 16, the light catching in the tall grass that swayed at the edges of the pavement. The air was still, heavy with the scent of late summer, cicadas buzzing lazily from somewhere. In the trees, Emily Collins walked steadily along the cracked asphalt, her small shoes scuffing pebbles into the roadside dust. At just 9 years old, she carried herself like someone older, a child pressed into learning resilience long before her time. Her backpack, faded at the edges and patched twice by her uncle, hung low against her narrow shoulders. Inside were her school books and, wrapped carefully in a piece of old cloth, the set of tools her Uncle Matthew had given her. They rattled faintly with each step, a quiet music she found comforting, as though her uncle's workshop were always close at hand. She hummed softly, a tune she could never quite remember the name of, when something broke the monotony of the road. Up ahead, gleaming in the fading light, was a car she hadn't seen that morning, a sleek black Mustang GT. Its hood was propped open, and beside it stood a man who looked as though he had been dropped into the countryside from another world. Entirely, his suit was the kind she had only glimpsed in store windows on trips into town, sharp lines cut from fabric that shimmered faintly under the sun. His shoes, polished leather, were already dusted white from the road. An expensive watch gleamed on his wrist as he lifted his hand in frustration. Phone pressed to his ear. His dark hair was neatly styled, his voice sharp and impatient. "I don't care what meeting I'm missing," he barked into the phone, his words cutting across the quiet. "I'm stuck on County Road 16 with a car that won't start, and apparently no mechanic can make it out here for hours." Emily slowed her steps, curiosity drawing her closer. The man looked out of place like a falcon trapped among sparrows. He ended his call with a snap, shoving the phone into his pocket and staring at the exposed engine as though sheer force of will might coax it back to life. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tight with irritation. For a moment, he looked utterly lost. Something in his helplessness stirred Emily's natural instinct to help. Her uncle always told her that knowing something didn't mean much if you weren't willing to share it. She adjusted her backpack and took a few steps forward, her small voice carrying across the still air. "Excuse me, mister," she called out. "Are you having car trouble?" The man turned sharply, his eyes widened a fraction when he saw her, just a thin, freckled girl in a worn school uniform, her brown hair pulled back in a messy braid. His expression softened into polite dismissal, the kind adults gave to children who had wandered into serious matters. "Just a small issue," he said with a tight smile. "Nothing to worry about." "Shouldn't you be getting home?" Emily shrugged, undeterred, and edged closer. The open hood revealed the tangle of pipes and wires she had grown familiar with. At her uncle's garage, she tilted her head thoughtfully. "I know a thing or two about cars," she said simply. "My uncle's a mechanic. He teaches me stuff." The man chuckled, a short laugh that carried equal parts amusement and disbelief. "That's very sweet, but this is a high-performance vehicle. It needs a professional." "Maybe," Emily conceded, dropping her backpack onto the gravel with a soft thud. She carefully unwrapped the cloth to reveal the small set of tools gleaming faintly in the sunlight. "But professionals are just people who know what to look for." Her tone was calm, matter of fact, the way her uncle spoke when he was diagnosing an engine. Without asking for permission, she leaned closer to the Mustang's engine, careful not to let her clean school blouse brush against the grime. Her eyes narrowed, scanning with surprising focus for someone so young. The man, Jack Reynolds, though Emily didn't know his name, yet crossed his arms, irritation slowly giving way to something else, curiosity. He had built an empire in New York real estate, made and broken deals worth millions, stared down competitors who trembled at the mention of his name, and now here he was, watching a 9-year-old girl study his Mustang with the intensity of a seasoned mechanic. When did it start having problems? Emily asked, her voice all business. Jack blinked, caught off guard. "About 20 minutes ago. The engine began to overheat, and then it just died." Emily nodded, her eyes flicking across the radiator, the belts, the faint shimmer of residue near the coolant reservoir. "Did you notice any sweet smell, like syrup?" Jack stared at her. The question was precise, professional, far beyond anything he expected from a child. Slowly, he nodded. "Yes. Actually, yes." Emily looked up at him then, her gaze steady, her expression calm. "I think I know what's wrong." For the first time all day, Jack Reynolds, millionaire, negotiator, The man who always had the answers felt his certainty slip. He studied the girl, astonished, realizing that perhaps he had just met someone who knew something he didn't. The sun had begun to dip lower, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. As Emily straightened from the Mustang's hood, her small hands rested on the edge of the car, her brow furrowed in thought as if she carried the weight of the world. Jack Reynolds studied her closely now, his initial amusement fading into something far more complicated. This wasn't ordinary curiosity. The girl had moved with certainty, with the quiet focus of someone who knew exactly what to look for. Jack cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. And what, exactly, do you think is wrong? His tone was meant to sound indulgent, but it carried an edge of tension he couldn't quite hide. Emily tilted her head toward the radiator, pointing with one small finger. Coolant leak. She said simply, see that white residue? It's dried coolant. Means the system isn't sealed. Probably the hose clamp came loose. Jack followed her gaze, stunned. She was right. He remembered catching that faint syrupy smell earlier and dismissing it as nothing. Now, under the dying sunlight, the residue stood out like a quiet confession. He swallowed hard, feeling both impressed and strangely unsettled. You're telling me, he said slowly, that a 9-year-old can diagnose what a certified mechanic didn't even answer the phone for? Emily smiled faintly, kneeling by her backpack and unrolling her tools. Uncle Matthew says machines don't care how old you are. They just want someone to listen. The simplicity of the statement struck Jack harder than he cared to admit. He crouched slightly, watching as she pulled out a small wrench and screwdriver, her motions calm and efficient. For a moment, he saw the outline of his own younger self, hungry to prove, desperate to be heard. He pushed the thought away, straightening his suit jacket as though the crisp lines of fabric might shield him from this child's quiet authority. Emily popped the clamp loose with a practiced motion, then tightened it carefully. It won't last forever, she said, but it should get you back to the city. You'll need a new hose soon, though. Jack blinked, half amused and half in awe. This little girl was diagnosing and patching his Mustang like she had been born under the hood of a car. For the first time, he felt a laugh bubble up, not sharp or derisive, but genuine, free. It startled him almost as much as it startled her. You know, he said, his voice softer now. Most kids your age are playing video games, not fixing cars on back roads. Emily shrugged, her braid slipping over her shoulder. Most kids don't have to help keep the lights on at home. The words hit Jack like a stone. He watched her face, the matter-of-fact delivery of something that should have been too heavy for a child to carry. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsettled by the quiet dignity she wore like armor. As the Mustang roared back to life under her small adjustments, Jack felt a flicker of unease settle deep inside him. This wasn't just luck, or a clever child showing off. There was something about her, something he couldn't place. He leaned against the car, arms crossed, watching her as if she were a puzzle piece he hadn't realized was missing. And then, as she brushed the dirt from her hands, he saw it, a flash of silver on her finger, a small ring, delicate and old-fashioned, blended in the fading sunlight. For one breathless moment, Jack's world stopped. The design was unmistakable, a circle of tiny etchings curling into a pattern he had only seen once before, on the hand of his sister, years ago, before she disappeared from his life forever. His heart hammered in his chest, the air suddenly to thin. He stared at the child, the ring, the faint innocence in her eyes, and felt his entire foundation tremble. Where? His voice cracked, and he forced it steady. Where did you get that ring? Emily glanced down, almost confused, as if she had forgotten it was there. She twisted it gently, a habit born of comfort rather than vanity. This, she said, lifting her hand so the light caught it. It was my mom's. She gave it to me before she got sick. She said it would keep me safe. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The world narrowed to the small silver band gleaming on a 9-year-old's finger. His polished watch suddenly felt heavy, his tailored suit suffocating. Every instinct told him this wasn't possible, yet the truth shimmered before him, undeniable, terrifying, electric. Emily tilted her head, studying his expression with curious innocence. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Jack swallowed hard, torn between disbelief and the chilling certainty rising inside. Him, the road, the car, the girl, all of it blurred into the background. The only thing that mattered now was the ring, and the haunting possibility that fate had just dropped a piece of his lost past into his path. And for the first time in years, Jack Reynolds' millionaire, empire builder, unshakable man felt. His knees threatened to give way. Jack Reynolds stood frozen beside the Mustang. His eyes locked on the glint of the little ring that circled Emily's small finger. The world around him seemed to dim, the cicadas hum fading, the breeze stilling in the tall grass. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart, steady and relentless, as memories he had buried clawed their way back to the surface. That ring, its etched pattern of curling vines and delicate ridges, had once belonged to his sister. He had been just a teenager when she stormed out of their father's house, vowing never to return. He had begged her to stay, had reached for her hand, and had seen that ring catch the light one last time as she walked away into the night. She never came back. Now, years later, it glimmered on the finger of a 9-year-old stranger who had just fixed his car on a lonely country road. Emily shifted under his gaze, twisting the ring as if she could sense the weight it carried. "Why are you staring at it like that?" she asked softly, her voice curious but edged with a trace of unease. Jack's mouth was dry. "Where did you say your mother got it?" Emily tilted her head. "It was hers. She wore it all the time. She told me it came from her family a long time ago. But she didn't like to talk about it much. When she got sick, she said I should have it, said it was mine now." Jack swallowed hard. His pulse quickened, his thoughts a storm. Could it be? Could the woman he had mourned, the sister he had assumed lost forever, be connected to this child? He forced his face into neutrality, but his voice trembled despite himself. What's your mother's name?" Emily hesitated, her small hands clutching the strap of her backpack. For the first time, she looked guarded, as though she had been warned not to trust strangers too easily. "Why do you want to know?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Jack crouched so he was closer to her height, though the move felt unsteady, unfamiliar. He was a man used to boardrooms and marble lobbies, not dusty roadsides and children with secrets, because, he said slowly, "that ring looks very much like one I used to know. It belonged to someone very important to me." The girl studied him, her gaze sharp and far older than her years. She had seen enough of life's harshness to know when someone was hiding something. But before she could answer, the Mustang gave. A loud hiss from under the hood. Steam curled upward, catching the fading sunlight, and both of them jumped at the sudden noise. Emily darted forward instinctively, peering into the engine. "The patch won't hold long," she muttered, her brain swinging over her shoulder. "We need to get it somewhere safe." Jack's eyes remained fixed on her, though the car was now spitting heat. She spoke with authority, and he couldn't deny the strange twist of admiration that accompanied his suspicion. She was brave, unflinching, as if the broken-down Mustang were just another puzzle waiting to be solved. "I'll drive slowly," he said, his voice distant, distracted. "You can show me the way into town. Is your house nearby?" Emily glanced at him, wary again. "Uncle Matthew doesn't like me talking to strangers." Jack almost smiled despite the storm raging inside. Him, smart man, but maybe you can trust me just long enough to point the way. Consider it payment for fixing my car. Emily studied him, then finally gave a small nod. "Turn right at the old water tower. We lived just past the church." The engine sputtered to life under Jack's hand, but his mind was elsewhere. As he shifted into gear, he stole another glance at her. The ring gleamed in the fading light, and the unease in his chest thickened into dread and hope intertwined as they drove. The countryside rolled past in soft greens and golds, the air heavy with the smell of hay and distant with smoke. Emily sat quietly, her small hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Jack's grip on the wheel tightened as questions burned inside him. Who was her mother? Why did she wear that ring? And most terrifying of all, what if this child wasn't just a chance encounter? The road wound toward the town, but Jack felt himself driving straight into the past, into shadows he had spent years trying to outrun. When they finally reached a small, weathered house by the edge of the woods, Jack's heart nearly stopped. Through the window, he caught sight of a photograph on the mantel, a young woman smiling faintly, wearing the same delicate ring on her hand. The air left his lungs. He knew that face, older, wearier, but unmistakable. It was her Dot, and if Emily was her daughter, the steering wheel trembled beneath his hands as a terrible, breathtaking possibility took shape. This poor little girl, with grease-stained fingers and a mechanic's instinct, wasn't just any child who had crossed his path. She was family. And fate had just handed her back to him. The Mustang rumbled into silence as Jack pulled it to the edge of the gravel drive. The little house before him looked worn but proud, its paint faded by years of rain and sun, its porch sagging slightly under the weight of time. There was life inside, though he could see it in the flower pots on the railing, in the laundry strung on a line out back, in the faint glow of a lamp through the window, and on the mantel, framed with polished by hand, he had glimpsed her face, the woman he thought he would never see again, his sister. Jack's throat constricted as Emily hopped out of the car, swinging her backpack with casual ease. She didn't seem to notice how his hands shook on the steering wheel, how the air around him had turned thick and charged, as though every choice he had made in his life was pressing down on him. At once, "Come on," she called, beckoning him toward the porch. "You should meet Uncle Matthew. He'll thank you for giving me a ride." Jack stepped out slowly, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. He adjusted his cufflinks, an old habit when never nerves threatened to surface, but the small ritual did nothing to calm him now. Each step toward the house felt like trespassing into a memory he had buried years ago. The door opened before Emily could reach for it. A broad-shouldered man in his 50s stood there, his hands still streaked with grease from a long day's work. His face was weathered, but his eyes were kind, though they hardened just a fraction when they landed on Jack's expensive suit and watched Emily. He said, his tone firm but gentle, "What did I tell you about talking to strangers on the road?" Emily's chin lifted with quiet defiance. "He wasn't just any stranger, Uncle. He needed help, and I fixed his car." Matthew's brows rose, a mixture of pride and exasperation flickering across his face. He looked at Jack then, measuring him with the silent suspicion of a man who had learned long ago not to take people at face value. "Name's Matthew Collins," he said finally, extending a hand that was rough and strong. Jack clasped it, his grip tighter than intended, as though holding onto this man might anchor him in the storm inside. "Jack Reynolds," he replied. His voice, usually steady and commanding, carried a note of hesitation. Matthew's gaze lingered on him, then flicked to the Mustang parked at the roadside. "So she got you running again, did she? Kid's got more skill in her hands than most apprentices I've trained. Stubborn, too." Emily beamed at the praise, but Jack hardly heard it. His attention had drifted past Matthew's shoulder, into the house where that photograph sat. His chest tightened with every breath. He had to know. He had to see. "Would you mind if I stepped inside for some water?" Jack asked, his tone careful, almost too casual. Matthew hesitated, then stepped aside. "Sure, don't usually get city folk out this way, but you're welcome." The house smelled of motor oil, with smoke and faint lavender. Jack's eyes swept across the modest living room, and there it was again, the photograph. His pulse quickened as he moved closer. The woman's eyes, though softened by years and hardship, were unmistakable. His sister. Her hand rested on a younger Emily's shoulder, and on that hand gleamed the very ring now circling Emily's finger. Jack gripped the back of a chair, his vision blurring at the edges. Matthew noticed his stillness, his stare locked on the frame. "You knew her," Matthew said slowly. It wasn't a question. His voice dropped into a cautious warning, like a man shielding what little family he had left. Jack turned, his composure crumbling. "She was my sister." The words came out ragged, torn from a place he had locked away for too long. "I thought she was gone forever." Matthew's eyes narrowed, his posture shifting into quiet defense. "She made her choices, walked away from your world, wanted nothing to do with the life she left behind." Jack's jaw tightened. "I never wanted her gone. I begged her to stay." His voice faltered, guilt pressing down like lead. "And now I find her child fixing my car on a country road." Emily stood between them now, her wide eyes darting from her uncle to Jack. Confusion clouded her face. "What are you talking about?" "My mom never. She never said anything about you." Jack knelt suddenly. The millionaire, who towered over boardrooms, now humbled before a child. His hands trembled as he looked at her, at the ring, at the echo of his sister's face in her small features. "She didn't tell you," he whispered. "Of course she wouldn't. But that ring, it was hers. And before her, it belonged to our family. That makes you." His voice caught. He couldn't bring himself to say it. Not yet. The truth was too heavy, too dangerous, too life-altering. Matthew's hand landed firmly on Jack's shoulder. "Careful, Reynolds. Don't go stirring up ghosts in this house. She's been through enough." But Jack couldn't stop. The more he looked at Emily, the stronger the certainty grew, pulsing through him like a drumbeat. She wasn't just any girl who had appeared to help him on the road. She was blood, and the question tearing through his soul was no longer whether it was possible, but whether he had the right to claim her as his own. The night settled heavy over the little house, the kind of silence only found in the countryside, where even the wind seemed to pause to listen. Jack Reynolds sat rigid on the edge of the couch, the faint creak of old wood beneath him loud in the stillness. His eyes lingered on the framed photo of his sister again, the familiar tilt of her head, the quiet sadness that had always haunted her smile. Emily had gone to her room after a long day, her small footsteps fading into the back hallway. Only Matthew remained, leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen, his arms crossed and his eyes sharp. "You shouldn't have come in here like this," Matthew said, his voice low. "Whatever ghosts you think you found, leave them be. She built a life without that world. Without you." Jack's jaw clenched. He had faced men who threatened empires, men who would smile as they gutted fortunes, yet this mechanic's steady gaze unsettled him. "You think I planned this?" Jack's voice trembled. "I didn't. But the moment I saw her, saw that ring, everything I thought I'd buried came back. She's my blood. Matthew, I can't just walk away." Matthew's eyes hardened further. "Blood doesn't mean a damn thing if you were never there." The words cut deeper than Jack expected. He opened his mouth, ready to retort, but he stopped when he heard a faint cough from the back room. Not Emily's. Weaker, fragile, the sound of someone fighting to hold on. Jack's pulse quickened. He turned his head toward the hallway, every instinct screaming at him to follow the sound. Matthew's voice cut through the air like a warning bell. "Don't," Matthew said firmly. "She doesn't need to see you. Not now. Not after all these years." Jack stood slowly, his heart pounding. "She's alive." His voice cracked with disbelief. "After all this time, she's alive." Matthew's silence was answer enough. Jack moved past him, his body tense, his breath shallow. He pushed the door open and stepped into the dimly lit room. The sight nearly brought him to his knees. There she was, his sister, pale, frail, her once bright eyes dulled by sickness, yet even in her weakness, she was unmistakable. Time had carved lines into her face, but the essence of her had not changed. She looked up slowly, her gaze hazy, but sharp enough to recognize him. Her lips parted in a whisper that carried both shock and grief. "Jack." The years between them collapsed in that single word. He staggered closer, his hands trembling as if afraid to touch her, afraid she might vanish like a dream. "I thought you were gone," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I lost you forever." Her eyes fluttered shut, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You did," she whispered, her voice thin. "You lost me the moment I walked away. But Emily, she's all I had left to give this world." Jack turned, his gaze falling on the shadow of the little girl peeking around the doorframe. Confusion and fear etched on her face. She had woken to the voices, to the storm gathering in the house. She clutched her small hands together, her eyes darting between the frail woman in bed and the man in the expensive suit, whose tears she did not understand. "Why are you crying?" Emily asked softly, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" Jack knelt, his chest aching, the truth clawing at his throat. But Matthew's words echoed in his mind. "Don't go stirring up ghosts." He swallowed hard, forcing his voice into something steady for the girl's sake, because, he said carefully, sometimes life gives us second chances when we least expect them. But as he met Emily's eyes, wide and searching, Jack knew this was no ordinary second chance. This was fate demanding an answer. He stepped back into the hallway, his face shadowed, his mind ablaze. That night, while the house slept, Jack Reynolds sat in his car with his laptop glowing faintly in the dark. His fingers flew across the keyboard, firing off emails, making calls to people who owed him favors, hospitals, specialists, a medical team that only the wealthiest could afford. If Emily's mother was still alive, Jack would fight for her. He would pull every string, spend every dollar, burn every bridge if he had to. He owed her that much. He owed Emily more. But as the engine hummed softly, the weight of his decision pressed down. Would helping them mean exposing the truth? Could Emily handle the revelation that the man she thought a stranger was family, the uncle she never knew she had? Jack leaned back in the leather seat, his eyes staring into the endless dark. The empire he had built suddenly felt hollow, fragile, like glass ready to shatter. And for the first time in his life, Jack Reynolds, man of power, man of certainty, felt the terrifying, electrifying pull of destiny, the road that had once led Him only the fortune now pointed toward something far more dangerous, far more precious, a little girl with a mechanic's heart, a dying sister who had kept secrets, and a truth that could rewrite everything. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The morning sun bled softly over the horizon, washing the little house in pale light. The roosters crowed somewhere in the distance, and the smell of coffee drifted faintly through the open kitchen window. Yet the air inside was far from calm. Jack Reynolds stood at the sink, his reflection fractured in the smudged glass of the window pane. He had not slept. His tie was gone, his crisp white shirt wrinkled from a night spent pacing between the couch and the front door. The empire he ruled from glass towers in New York seemed like another life entirely. Here, in this weathered farmhouse, the walls were closing in with secrets that refused to stay buried. Behind him, Matthew Collins shuffled in, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He poured himself coffee, the mug clinking against the counter. But his eyes never left Jack. There was no friendliness in his stare this morning, only quiet steel. "You should leave before she wakes," Matthew muttered, his voice low. "Emily doesn't need confusion. She doesn't need promises that'll break her heart when you walk away." Jack turned sharply, his jaw tight. "I'm not walking away. Not this time." His voice cracked with something rawer than pride. "I spent my life building everything: money, power, respect, but last night, for the first time in decades, I felt like I'd built nothing at all. That little girl," his voice faltered, "she's family, Matthew. She's all I have left of my sister." Matthew slammed the mug down on the table, coffee sloshing over the rim. "Family?" His eyes narrowed, burning. Where was family when she begged for help? Where was family when your father threw her out? When she had nowhere to go? You stayed behind, didn't you? Comfortable, obedient. You let her leave alone. The word struck Jack like a hammer. He staggered back, the memory of that night burning fresh again, the shouting, the slammed door, the last glimpse of her walking into the dark with nothing but a small bag and that silver ring. He had been young, afraid of their father's wrath, too paralyzed to move. And now, years later, guilt hollowed him out like a wound that never healed. "I was a coward," Jack whispered, his voice hoarse. "And I've hated myself for it every day since." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint creak of the stairs. Both men turned to see Emily standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. She wore her school blouse, her braids slightly undone, but her gaze was sharp. Children learn to read storms and voices before they learn to read books. "What are you fighting about?" she asked, her small voice breaking the tension like a blade. Neither man spoke. Matthew's jaw worked, but he couldn't form the words. Jack stepped forward, dropping to one knee so his eyes were level with hers. "Emily," he began carefully, his hands trembling. "Has your mother ever told you much about her life before you were born?" Emily frowned. "She said she grew up in the city. She didn't like it. She said she left to start over." "Why?" Jack's throat tightened. The truth pressed against his lips like fire, desperate to be freed. He saw her confusion, her fragile trust, and he hesitated, torn between revelation and protection, before he could answer. A weak voice carried from down the hallway. "Emily." It was her mother. Faint, breathless, Emily turned and rushed toward the sound. Jack and Matthew followed, tension snapping like wire. The room was dim, curtains drawn to soften the morning glare. The woman lay propped up against pillows, her breathing shallow, but her eyes lit up when Emily climbed onto the bed. She stroked her daughter's hair, her thin fingers trembling. "Mom, this is the man I told you about," Emily said brightly, pointing back toward Jack. "The one whose car I fixed. He's strange." He knew the ring. The woman's eyes shifted, and for a heartbeat, time froze. Recognition slammed into her gaze, her lips parting as though she had seen a ghost. "Jack," she whispered. Emily's head jerked back, her mouth falling open. "You know him?" Tears filled the woman's eyes, slipping down her cheeks. "He's my brother," she said weakly. "Your uncle." The air in the room shattered with those words. Emily's breath caught, her little body stiffening as she turned between them, confusion clouding her face. "Uncle, that can't be. You never told me." Jack staggered closer, his heart hammering. "I didn't know where you were. I thought I'd lost you forever. And now I see I haven't. Not completely." Emily looked at him, wide-eyed, the ring on her finger catching the light between them. The silence was so heavy that even the walls seemed to lean in to listen. Matthew's voice finally cut through. rough and bitter. Now you know the truth, but don't think for a second that makes things simple. You're too late. Reynolds, you can't undo years of absence with one night and a few words. Jack turned on him, his eyes blazing. Then I'll do more. That words, I'll do whatever it takes. She needs treatment, real treatment. Specialists, hospitals. I can make it happen. The woman shook her head weakly. No, Jack, I don't want Emily swept into your world of power and greed. I left all that behind. Emily's small hand tightened around her mother's. Mom, please, what if you can help? What if you can? Save you? Jack's chest ached as he looked between them, the frail sister he had failed to protect, and the niece he had found by chance on a lonely road. Suspense gnawed at the edges of his resolve. He was staring at a choice that could tear them apart or bind them forever. The truth was out now, raw and unyielding. But what Jack did with it, that would decide everything. And as the morning light spilled across the ring on Emily's finger, Jack Reynolds knew the next step would change not only their lives, but his own dash forever. The day stretched long and heavy inside that weathered house, as though time itself hesitated, unwilling to move forward until the truth fully came out. Jack Reynolds sat in the wooden chair beside his sister's bed, his polished watch glinting faintly in the dim light. Emily curled close to her mother, her wide eyes darting between them, full of questions too big for a child her age to ask. The silence was a storm ready to break, and Jack felt its weight pressing against his chest. His sister coughed, her frail body trembling. She reached for Emily's hand with what strength she had left, then looked at Jack with an expression both weary and defiant. You don't belong here, Jack. You left this life behind years ago. Why now? Why come back? Jack's voice cracked, rawer than it had ever been in any boardroom or courtroom. I didn't come back. I was thrown back into it. By her. He gestured toward Emily, his hand trembling. She found me on the road. She saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving. And then I saw that ring, and I realized I hadn't lost everything after all. His sister's lips trembled, her gaze shifting to the ring on Emily's small finger. For a moment, her eyes softened with love and sorrow all at once. Emily leaned forward, her voice timid but urgent. Mom, why didn't you tell me he was my uncle? Why did you hide him from me? Her mother closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Because, she whispered, the world he comes from, it destroyed me. I wanted to keep you safe from it. Jack's fist clenched against his knees. Don't you see? That world doesn't matter anymore. I don't care about the money, the empire, the name. None of it means anything without family. You're all I have left. Emily is all I have left. Matthew stood in the doorway, his arms folded, his jaw tight. Words are easy, Reynolds. You've had decades to come back. Why should she trust you now? Jack rose suddenly, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. For once, he didn't look like the untouchable millionaire. He looked like a man stripped bare, fighting for something far greater than wealth. He turned to Matthew, his voice thundering with conviction. Because I will prove it. I'll bring in doctors, specialists, whatever it takes. I'll drain every account if I have to. She's not going to die in this bed while I stand here doing nothing. The room fell into stunned silence. His sister's lips parted in disbelief, her eyes glistening with a mixture of hope and fear. Jack, you do that? After everything? Jack dropped to his knees at her bedside, his shoulders shaking. I will not lose you again. I already lost you once because I was too afraid to fight. Not this time. Not when Emily still needs you. Not when I still need you. Emily's hand slipped into his then, small and trembling but steady. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. You promise you won't leave us? Jack looked into her eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt the armor of his life crack completely. Tears spilled freely as he bowed his head before her. I promise, on everything I have, on everything I built, I will never leave you. You're my family, Emily, and I'll protect you with everything I am. The words hung heavy in the air, the kind of promise that reshapes lives. Suddenly, a knock rattled the front door, sharp, urgent. Matthew stiffened, moving to answer it. When he swung the door open, two men in dark suits stood there, their expressions grim. Jack's stomach dropped. These weren't neighbors. They weren't friends. They were from his world, the one he had just vowed to leave behind. Mr. Reynolds, one of them said, his tone clipped. You're needed in the city immediately. There's been an incident with your company. They say it can't wait. Jack's mind spun. His empire was burning without him, the life he had built demanding his return. But behind him, he felt the fragile warmth of Emily's hand in his, the weight of his sister's frail body in the bed, the truth of the vow he had just spoken, his old life or his family, his power or his blood. The suspense wrapped around the room like a tightening rope. Emily's eyes searched his face, wide and desperate, silently begging him to choose her. His sister's shallow breathing filled the silence, a reminder that time was slipping away. Jack rose slowly, his chest heaving. He looked the suited man dead in the eye, his voice steady with a conviction that shocked even himself. "Tell them they'll have to wait. My family comes first." The men exchanged uneasy glances, but Jack didn't care. He closed the door firmly, locking it as though shutting out the old world that had ruled him for too long. He turned back to the room, to Emily, to his sister, and for the first time in his life, he knew he had made the only decision that mattered. Emily smiled, faintly, tears sparkling in her eyes. "You really mean it, don't you?" Jack knelt once more, his hand cupping her small fingers around the ring. "Yes, that ring isn't just a reminder of the past anymore. It's a promise for the future. For you, for all of us." And as the dawn light broke fully across the horizon, flooding the little house with gold, Jack Reynolds, once a man defined by wealth and power, was reborn as something far more fragile, far more powerful, a brother reclaimed and an uncle who had finally found his family.